You know what time it is, DGen Nation family. What is going on? What is happening? It's the DGen Nation podcast powered by the Fantasy Authority. And my goodness, we are at week 18, boys, the last regular season slate of of the season. It's crazy. I think we were just turning on the microphones and getting after it for week one. And now here we are at week 18, the week of motivation, the week of incentives, the week of beautiful DFS, as Maddie likes to call it in our chat. He was so excited and so giddy to come on these airwaves and chat it up with us, chat it up with you people. I know Maddie's got all the takes to be firing off for this week 18 slate. But before we get into the slate, shout out to everybody who's watching along with us here on a Friday as we talk about the Sunday main slate. We got 13 games on tap, boys, and so excited to get after it with you guys. Welcoming in Maddie D at Maddie DFS is where you can find him on Twitter and X, and the Godfather himself, Kevin Steele, at Fantasy Wrath 13. Fellas, how we feeling about week 18? I know we were all excited to hop on the spot for the people. We couldn't miss out on it. I mean, it's still a slate. Like even if it is week 18, even if it is looking gross with this 13 gamer on Sunday, it's still football, man. I remember in the doldrums of summer when baseball is kind of hit its peak, and we're waiting. Basketball hasn't started yet, and we're all itching to just get some DFS in our lives for NFL. So it's hard to complain that we have this slate that's on tap for us with a lot of potential. Maddie, I'll welcome you in, man. How you feeling about this slate? What you doing?
Oh, I hate this slate. This slate stinks. But like you said, it's a slate, so we got to play it. No, I actually think it's fine. It's just the guys that I like are going to be popular, so it's tough for me to force myself to be uncomfortable this week with some lower owned guys that I guess we'll try to talk about. But yeah, it's a pretty straightforward slate for me, but we can certainly chat it up.
Kev, Godfather himself, week 18. I mean, you are the quintessential king of unlocking, the off the wall plays here, and you have quite the slate to be able to do it this week, as we have some mighty fine chalk coming in on plays, even with it being a 13 game slate, even with there being some uncertainty that won't get figured out quite until Saturday, possibly wraps up with that 2 gamer on Saturday as well. So how you feeling about this slate, and how are you going to be attacking it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some clear just paths to target, and I don't think it's just the games that where the teams have motivation to play, like clinch playoff spot or stuff like that. I don't think that's the only path to. I think there's a few games on the slate where teams are going to be playing like normal, and so obviously incentives are also huge on a slate like this. We're trying to parse through because there are most teams are going to try to do whatever they can to try to get players. Some of their incentives and stuff like that. And so those are things that we can take a look at and try to get through. But I still think it's a okay slate. It's not as good as what it could have been with some losses last week. And, like the Rams, if we would have had the Rams-Seattle game, that would have been one that would have been a lot of fun with them playing each other, one that would have mattered. So we kind of lost some of that a little bit, but I still think there's enough here that you can kind of get through and play on this slate.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, let's just hop right into it. So, I mean, like I said, it's the week of incentives. It's the week of motivation. I mean, week 18, we've been playing DFS long enough, boys. We know that this is always the talk about, before it was week 17, before we got the 17 game season, and it's just a matter of who was going to be playing, who was inactive. Everybody kind of talks about it being a preseason DFS week, and that's why I'm excited to hear your thoughts, Maddie, Mr. DFS preseason DFS GOAT himself, who was coming in and telling us about Jacoby Myers before he was even a thing. But ad nauseum, all that's been talked about this week is what are guys' contracts looking like, who's got the motivation to play in, and it's still a slate, in and of itself, where we're going to have popular plays, but there's going to be some off the wall plays as well too. I mean, it's been weeks, it's been months since we've had a 13 gamer, on tap for a main slate. So there's just that much more potential for, some off the wall plays to kind of pop off and hit. And when we have the quarterback position here, we got some pretty interesting things that kind of jump off the page. I think Jaden Daniels at the top, right behind Josh Allen, I mean, he'll be active, but he'll only play a series or two to keep his streak alive. And then I expect him to be out. So Jaden Daniels is probably going to be a high price quarterback. I don't see people really trying to get to him. But Washington still has a little bit to play for. Dan Quinn has come out and said that they're going to attack this game, like it's any other. They're going against Dallas, a team that we've been attacking, for a while. So like him, obviously Baker, a lot's been talked about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They need a win to win the division. He's got contract incentives. Mike Evans got contract incentives. He's $7K. We could just run it back. I mean, Baker stacks last week were, fire. They were incredible, and he should be in a good spot to be able to put up again. And then the other quarterback who, I'm going to probably like getting to, and that's just because of the pricing, is Joe Flacco. We're not going to have Anthony Richardson again for this Colts team who, when we talk about motivation, like this Indy Jacksonville team, both of these teams are out. They really don't have anything to play for, but this could be like a last hurrah for Flacco. I mean, he's getting up there in age, like not a lot. And we saw last week, like what he's capable of doing, really narrow distribution of targets there with 3 guys. And I do like a wide receiver who was popular last week, and I don't think people are going to be apt to be getting to all that much this week with him. So those are the 3 quarterbacks that are standing out to me. Obviously, there's more to be talked about, potentially with leverage with Penix off of Bijan and things like that nature. But Maddie, what are you doing at the quarterback position this week, and how's it looking to you?
I actually think that there's just a lock button quarterback that you just play, and that's Josh Dobbs. I mean, we saw the rushing ability last week. We saw the rushing ability last year. He had a rushing touchdown score last week in very limited action. He had 5 straight games with a rushing touchdown from week 7 through weeks 11 last year. And in those games, he scored 16, 25, 26, 25, and 19 DK points. And so it's like, I mean, sure, the normal 4K QBs that you get, they're most likely going to get you somewhere around, 12 to 14 points. And you're like, I'm not going to play that guy just because he's 4K, because he doesn't really have upside. Josh Dobbs is totally different. And especially when you throw Dobbs into this San Francisco offense, that we've seen Purdy thrive under, and really anybody thrive under with Shanahan. So Dobbs for me is just a slam dunk lock play, and because he's got his legs, you don't really have to go crazy with stacking partners either. You can still get pieces of these other games, like playing Mike Evans, and playing Brian Thomas Jr. and paying up for tight end, and things like that. So quarterback's straightforward for me. I'm playing Dobbs and logging out.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment, Maddie. And I think with Dobbs, we saw him last year in Minnesota, right? Like doing some things, and he just is one of those plays. I mean, it is different with San Fran, and we'll see. Like, it is an interesting kind of stack option with him, as there are some interesting pieces for San Fran. I do like Garindo as well too, but again, it's like you don't get a 4K quarterback who's going to be playing, the game like he will be. It's not like he really didn't have like a 300-yard game passing, so you might not get that bonus, but he did have some multi-touchdown games passing last year. A couple were added in with some rushing. I think his most rushing yards they had last year was like 45 or something like that. But he had a couple 20-yard games and things like that. And you saw how they were using him when Purdy left the game. So it is an interesting scenario there to be able to get him in. We usually talk about things from a tournament perspective on this show. That's where we all usually play. But if for some reason you guys are playing cash games this week, the Masters, that is, you have to play Josh Dobbs. It's just you put him in, and there's no even rhyme or reason to think about anything else. He's 4K, allows you to do a lot with your roster. Kev, what's the quarterback slate looking like to you, and how are you planning on attacking it, knowing that this is kind of a slate where we don't really have to stack necessarily? I mean, there's so many good options, or it's just a weird week with teams playing for something, teams not playing for something, who's going to be out there, and it's probably a week unlike any where maybe you're stacking with the quarterback necessarily, but like game stacking might matter less, and even stacking to a certain point might matter a little bit less if you get the plays right. How are you attacking it this week?
Yeah, I mean, like you kind of mentioned, it's kind of a weird, because there's really only one game that really stands out in terms of like implied team total or over under, and that's the Falcons and Panthers game. There's a 48 point total. Because then after that, I mean, it drops down to 44, 43, and then we start getting down. Like it, I laughed this morning when I was looking at some of these totals, and think the Browns have a 10-point implied team total. Like, I don't know if I've ever seen a team with that low of implied team total before. Like, that's embarrassingly bad. But I think it's accurate. But either way, like, I think that, like, you could look at that Falcons game as one because, we have seen the Panthers outside of last week where the Panthers offense has looked a lot better. Obviously, this team's going to be a little more motivated to, try to beat the Falcons. Now, obviously the Falcons need help, but they're not, since they're playing at the same time, they're going to have to go for it. If something crazy were to happen and the Saints were to knock off the Bucs. But, like, I think that's the one game environment you could look at as, like, maybe it could get there in a game, a game sack. I also like the Jacksonville and Indy game. I think that game, I think there's a lot to like out of that game. I don't know if you want to full on stack it, but you could with Flacco. Flacco is obviously cheap enough where you could stack it with Michael Pittman. Yeah, and then you could probably, obviously run it back with Brian Thomas Jr. I like that as well. But I think it does make a lot of sense just to attack, with Joshua Dobbs. Everything that Matty brought up is 100%. Like, and he's not your normal just shit backup quarterback. Like, he's somebody that can get there. I do like, Kyler Murray as well. We talked about incentives. He is somebody that has incentives to play for. I think he needs 50 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. I think that's what he is needing. So it sounds by all accounts, for the most part, that the Cardinals are going to, be playing normal players. Everyone's going to play. So outside of James Conner, which never should have played last week anyway, but so I do think that he is somebody that we could look on the other side if you wanted to with Kyler Murray. Now he is, on the more expensive side. He's $6K, but obviously when you can save $2K, with Joshua Dobbs. But I like him. You have the Chiefs game against Denver. The Chiefs are pretty much sitting like almost all of their like really important defensive pieces. I mean, Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, Trey McDuffie, Nick Bolton. I mean, so many of their players on defense are going to be out. And so, like, this is not going to be the same Chiefs defense that we typically see. And so, obviously, the Broncos have to win to get in. So, especially if the Bengals win, then that pressure gets there. So, Bo Nix is $6,400. I think you can look there too. But I don't know if the offense side on the Chiefs is going to be able to push them enough to make them to really have to score a ton of points. So, I don't know if you necessarily have to get there. Maybe a more of a one-off spot where you play like Cortland Sutton, who has his own incentives in this game. He needs 82 receiving yards to get $500,000. And then you also have Marvin Mims, who went off last week. I think you could look there too. It's probably one-offs.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, obviously, having some interest in Bo Nix just because they need to win. But I mean, this Kansas City defense, I mean, Spagnuolo with the scheme. And it's just always, I think we get so caught up on, the teams that need to win or the teams that, are in the good spot or everything. And it's like, that doesn't always happen. That doesn't always come to fruition. Like, I mean, I don't project it. I mean, the 10.5-point dogs the Broncos are, but it's still playing, it's still playing KC. It's still playing a divisional opponent. And like, this is a rookie quarterback. Like, we don't know how they're going to play with the pressure of like needing to win a game. And it's Carson Wentz on the other side. Whatever you think about Carson Wentz, I mean, he's a proven veteran quarterback. So I'm not expecting Kansas City to just roll over and let this team walk into the playoffs. So interesting spots all across the board. But yeah, I don't know if we need to get to Knicks this week. The one other quarterback before that I wanted to talk about before we move it along here is, Justin Herbert can end up being interesting depending on what happens tomorrow in that Saturday slate. So if the Steelers win, the Chargers are definitely in play because they would then be looking to get some seeding with a win there against the Raiders. And that game becomes interesting because Antonio Pierce, I mean, draft picks be damned, like he's playing these games to win. So like, we got Myers, we got Bowers with Aiden O'Connell on the other side. Like that game could actually be really bananas if we get a full-on go from the Chargers. So that's something I want to keep in mind as the Saturday slates lock up. And, we know a lot of people set their lineups. It's potential that people will set them on Saturday nights and not really be thinking about it all too much with so many, just all the week things been hammering in of who the guys you should be playing. But yeah, I'll be interested to see where those Chargers come in at in their pricing and ownership with their price and ownership, because that could be a fun one.
I agree on that one. I think the other two that like for sure are in play is Baker Mayfield. He's in play every single week. Like he's been the best, one of the best DFS quarterbacks all year. I mean, he just went nuclear last week. Obviously, it's a must-win game for them. This offense is phenomenal. And then Jaden Daniels It does sound like Washington is planning on playing their stars the entire time for the seeding. So obviously, Jane Daniels is definitely in play as well. I think both of those guys definitely should be mentioned. I mean, they are much more expensive to get to, but to be honest with you, like you can pretty much do whatever the hell you want on the slate because there's so much value that is on the slate. Like I don't think you necessarily have to just shy away from anything. So Daniels and Baker Mayfield are both 100% in play too.
No, 100%. I mean, I think for me, it's definitely going to have interest in Baker Mayfield because of the situation there. It would probably then be Flacco, and then it would become Herbert for me if the Chargers have to play for something, and then if not, I might look to get to some Jaden Daniels, but I do like Flacco and Baker a lot, and then if I depending on who I want to jam in necessarily, I might consider Dobbs as well too. But I just know I know he'll be the highest owned quarterback on the slate, which worries me a little bit from a GPP perspective. I'm not sure about the upside. There's not many. I shouldn't say that because there are. We'll talk about it running back. I was gonna say there's not many high priced guys that I want to jam in, but it does all come to fruition.
Two.
When you're making your lineups. I don't think you need to necessarily play him to get to multiple guys, but when we talk about tight end, then yeah, it could be looking at getting Dobbs to be able to get a high price tight end with these running backs, with these wide receivers. Let's talk about running back. As I see Maddie kind of chomping at the bit there on who the guys he wants to jam in at, and running back all year. And I know I've talked about it. We've talked about it as a pod as well. Like when the running back chalk is a chalk, usually means that these guys are just good plays, and you might just have to bite the bullet and just eat that chalk at that position. It's a little bit more volatile at the wide receiver position. Just ask anybody who played Josh Downs. Oh, let me raise my hand. Last week at near 50% ownership, which was crazy. I did not expect him to be that high owned, but he was 4,800 in a good spot, so that is what it is. But this week we're gonna have Bijan Robinson 8,500 as one of the most popular plays on the slate. Atlanta has to play for something. It's a great matchup against Carolina. I mean, you could go down the list and check the boxes on why Bijan is standing out this week. Now, my favorite thing is when Bijan has a good game that's on an island game. There was that Washington game that we saw, I believe that was Sunday Night Football, right? And so he puts up 24.8, and now this week, people want to play him. And I think he is a great play on paper, but we haven't, he's only gotten, close to, he's been consistent. He's gotten that 30 burger once. And this is a game that they need to win. So I expect them, they've been using him a lot with Penix being in there. But he is 8,500. And so you're definitely going to, it's just a weird week with week 18. You're going to want him to get those 30 points that you're paying up for. But maybe it might not matter on this slate. But there are some running back spots that become interesting. Bijan, I know, will be at the top. He'll be extremely popular. I think the other popular guy, which will be a pay down option, is Michael Carter, as you alluded to, Kev, like no James Conner. You play Michael Carter with Kyler Murray potentially. That'll be interesting there. J.K. Dobbins becomes interesting. I know he has some incentives as well too. So if the Chargers are playing for something, he's 6,300. I like him. Tony Pollard might be in play this week for people. He's 6,200. Has some incentives. There's no Tajay Spears. And then we're gonna get some of these other guys like Isaac Garindo is 5,900. He's in the mix. Bucky Irving and Rashad White with the Tampa Bay game. Those guys wanted to perform. They're in the mix. So it does become an interesting slate. There's no Kyron Williams, so we could have Blake Corum show. It does become an interesting slate from a running back perspective, but the chalk guys are chalk for a reason. So Maddie, how are you attacking this running back slate knowing that you're playing Josh Dobbs?
Yeah, it's running back's the same as quarterback for me. Like I think there's 3 clear-cut guys that are significantly better plays than everybody else. And you mentioned some guys that, you could certainly make a case for, but I think that the top 3 for me are by far better than the rest. And that's Bijan against Carolina in a must-win game for Atlanta. If there's ever a game, we've seen Bijan start to take over, really the lead role recently, where he's not really sharing as much snaps with Algier. But if there's ever a game where Bijan just doesn't come off the field, it's week 18 in a must-win game against Carolina. And Darnell Mooney's dealing with an injury as well. He's been banged up. So, it could just be a game where they just run the ball a lot with a rookie quarterback, making his second start ever. so it's, it's just such a good spot for Bijan that I just think he absolutely smashes here. And very pretty much the exact same story. The Saints have been almost just as bad as against the run as Carolina has. And now you've got Bucky Irving, who all those same things that I just said about Bijan apply to Bucky Irving. Bucky has taken over the lead role and become the main guy for the Bucs. And the Saints' run defense is bottom 5 over the last 2 weeks and bottom 6 over the last entire season. So it's a good spot. It's a must-win game. Bucky's not going to really come off the field, throughout the entirety of this game. I think the Bucs score 40 again. It's going to be the Evans and Bucky show. It's been McMillan, it's been Payne Durham, it's been these other guys, but I really think this week, Bucky Irving. I mean, Bucky Irving scored like 26 DK points last week without finding the end zone. You know, like that's absurd. He had 77 receiving yards, 20 carries for 113 yards on the ground, had no touchdowns, and scored 26 DK points. So, you give him 2 of those touchdowns, all of a sudden he's up near 40. And, no matter how owned he is, if he scores 40, he's must own. So, or must play. So it's Bucky and Bijan for me. And the other guy, I think, as long as he plays, you mentioned him in the incentive group, but Tony Pollard without Tyjae Spears, Houston's quietly been very bad against the run over the last 4 weeks as well. And Pollard with no Spears, Pollard's lost a lot of work to Spears, especially late in games. And it's just such a really good matchup for him against Houston. 6,200 is a good savings off of those 2 expensive guys. I would prefer him. We've seen Spears, kind of crush over the last couple of weeks with Rudolph in at quarterback. So, I would just prefer Pollard over the guys like Corum and these other, guys that typically don't start, because I think a lot of those offenses just aren't going to score many points with all the backups in. So I'd rather run with the guy that's going to get all the reps because his backup is not playing. So I do like Pollard as the number 3 option.
Love it. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be, I think there are some definite fragile spots, Maddie, as you mentioned, because it's like, the dude might be in line for work, but like, what's the offense going to do? So to speak,
Ray Davis is a perfect example, right? If this was a slate where James Cook was out and Josh Allen was playing, I would have 100% Ray Davis across the board at 5,200 against New England. Right. I just like how many points how much is Buffalo going to score? I mean, sure, he can catch some passes, and he's obviously going to be heavily utilized in the run game. But from a ceiling perspective, like just how many times are they going to get down there and maybe New England's bad enough that it doesn't really matter who the quarterback is,
Right.
So
I mean, it could be the Trubisky show, just lighting it up there. But it does, it's like, you got to look at the situation. I mean, for me, like a guy who I never play, but I believe he's listed as questionable, even though he has an IR tag, and that's Miles Sanders. He's 4K. So like, I do love that Tampa Bay Carolina game. Like, there's no Chuba Hubbard. Miles Sanders, the minimum. Like, if they activate this dude and are playing him, like, I might have some interest in him just because of the way that Carolina has been playing their opponents since Bryce Young's been back in the picture. Like, that's a spot where I'm like, okay, like, I expect them to be doing the same things they've been doing. Tampa Bay is going to put up points on the other side. Like, let me get some exposure to that game, so to speak. Like, these games that I'm not really getting exposure to, I'm just not going to play these guys. Like, if they beat me, they beat me as one-offs. But in games where I'm interested in the other team and think that there could be some meat on the bones there, then I'm looking at guys where I'm like, okay, this might be in the mix. Kev, how are you feeling about running back this week, and what are you doing?
Well, I mean, I definitely agree with the running back you brought up. Jonathan Taylor's also in that group, 8,200. Just gets such a big workload last week. Saw 32 carries last week, 4 targets. Obviously, it's just had 2 monster games back to back, 42 in week 16, 30 in week 17. Good matchup against the Jaguars. Jaguars are terrible against the run. So, like, he's also in play in that same group with Bijan and Bucky Irving. I think Zach Charbonnet should be more talked about and more owned than what he is, but he's not. Right now, we're coming in right around 10, 12% ownership on this slate. That's pretty significant for a player even last week who still handled 76% of the snaps, 60% of the rush attempts, and about 15% target share. The Seahawks said that they're going to play their starters just like regular. Obviously, Kenneth Walker was placed on IR, so you don't have to worry about that. I do expect Kenny McIntosh to probably mix it a little bit, but still, Charbonnet, I think at 6,700 is in a matchup against the Rams, where the Rams are going to be resting a lot of their starters. I think this is a really good spot for Charbonnet, who I think could pay off pretty big, especially at low ownership. I think because on this slate, everybody's going to be playing very similar builds because of the path. And so, I think if you can find one or two off, lower owned guys, I think that's what's going to separate yourself on the slate. And obviously, and on this slate is so much like an NBA slate. News is going to be absolutely critical, and paying attention as much news as you possibly can and try to get as much information as you can on how some of these things are going to play out. But I do really like Zach Charbonnet at $6,700. Matchup is there. The Rams are definitely a team, even on a normal slate, whatever they're fighting for something, there's still a defense that you can attack. Since week 12, they have allowed almost 140 rushing yards per game. That's top 8 in the league. They are allowing the second highest yard before contact per attempt as well. So I think this is a really good spot for Zach Charbonnet at 6,700. And then, I think Guerendo, we talked about that. I think he's certainly in play just because of, the usage, that he's going to get the lion's share of the touches from this backfield. He is going to be the lead back. And it is a good spot against Arizona. He's 5,900, on a normal slate. I think he would be 40% owned if you could get Isaac Guerendo at that cost. So I think he is being overlooked as well. And then past that, I think if I was going to play one of the sub 5K running backs, I think it probably would be Michael Carter, just because he's going to be involved in the passing game. Trey Benson, James Conner, both on IR. He's going to be the workhorse, in the backfield. And so at $4,700, he would be the guy that I would probably want to play. But I see Will Shipley getting a lot of ownership. I don't really care about that. I think there's other running backs in that backfield that can see touches. The Chiefs backfield, you're going to have, without Isaiah Pacheco or Kareem Hunt, it's going to be Carson Steele and it's going to be Samaje Perine. But it's not a great matchup. Denver's been really good against the run this year. And so I really don't have much interest there. I will say I expect for the majority of the Chiefs' offensive line to play most of that game. And so they are going to have their offensive line intact there. You probably see a couple guys mix in. But I don't really have much interest past that when it comes to those other guys.
Yeah, that's fair. And then I think that, real quickly before I misspoke earlier about Miles Sanders, they're playing Carolina's playing Atlanta, so it would be the Atlanta side, not the Tampa Bay side. I had that mixed up, but either way, Miles Sanders is somebody who's on my radar, not in play yet because he's not officially active, but just something I want to keep an eye on. I believe Miami, even though with Tua out, they could potentially be playing for this playoff spot. I believe so. Devon Achane, I guess, is in the mix going against the Jets. But it's just been tough without Tua, to kind of trust this offense. But he's 7,200. He's a guy that it wouldn't surprise me just from a raw point standpoint if he, ends up doing something of significance, especially if they're playing for something. This Jets defense has been absolutely obliterated as of late by their opponents who, everything's just going haywire there with, Rodgers kind of running everybody out of work. But, he would be an interesting guy, only 500 more, than Zach Charbonnet, a couple $100 less than a Bucky Irving. I think, he's been a guy who's been winning people's slates, pretty much this year. So if they are playing for something there, that would be interesting. But just wanted to bring him up there. Yeah, running back's going to be nuts. And I agree with you, Kev, treating it, where news is just as much important as it is for some of these other sports in DFS that we play. You want to be paying attention to those inactive lists. It is, again, a 13-game slate. And I believe there's only 5 games that are in that afternoon slate. So we're looking at 8 games in that noon slot, which is going to be, that's a lot to unpack there. So will be a fun one. Wide receiver, boys. This is a fun one to talk about as well too, because I think there's going to be so many spots that just jump off the page for people. I don't know. I think this is the best way to get different at this position at wide receiver. We know how volatile it can be, but everybody's going to want to play Mike Evans. I can't even Kev, you've been talking about incentives. The guys like, I'll let you go on it. Everybody and their mom has been talking about all the incentives that this dude needs. And I think that he is in a prime spot to hit him. I think there's no question at all that they want to get him the yards. I think it's so important to, Baker's talked about it. Mike Evans has talked about it. Like, this is a Jerry Rice record. I think the yards are for sure a foregone conclusion. They're going to try and do everything that they can to get him to 1,000. Then he needs 2 touchdowns and the catches. It's like, yeah, there's incentives there, but like the touchdowns are so variant. But last week they got into the red zone and they were going to Mike Evans and he was just catching the damn thing. So he's a great play at 8K. It'll be funny to see. I think last week there were some people that played Mike Evans without Baker. I'll be curious to see how many people play him without Baker this week, because I think he'll just be that popular that people want to get him on builds no matter what. But definitely like stacking him with Baker. But Brian Thomas Jr., this rookie wide receiver class has been absolutely incredible, and he's been at the top of that. This guy's got a Pro Bowl snub now entering this game going against Indy, so I think he'll play with some juice there in that game. The Indy wide receivers are going to be fun to talk about. I'm going to go back to the Josh Downs well. I think he's going to be fun. Hey, shout out to Big Rob 748 who's coming in on the chat. First game I've been plays the Saints with no Lattimore. Yeah, that's a fun one as well too. So yeah, even more reason why Mike Evans will get some love there. But yeah, Brian Thomas Jr. is in play for me. Obviously Ladd McConkey comes in play if I'm going to be playing Herbert. If we find out that they have something to play for, Drake London is a guy who I haven't got really too much interest in. When it was Kirk Cousins, I always wanted to stack him with the quarterback because he's so volume dependent. But as Maddie alluded to, like without Mooney being out there in a must-win game, he's 6,500, and we saw Penix be able to, get him the ball and lock onto him. So Drake London definitely firmly in play there. Jackson Smith and Jigba 6,100. I'm surprised that this guy has not gotten to the 7K range all this season. He's had, pretty solid year. So Jason's going to be one. I'll let you wax poetic about Juwan Jennings, Maddie, if you're going to be playing Josh Dobbs. There has been some narrative street with that being his college quarterback. So maybe you're playing Juwan Jennings as your favorite option there to run it with Dobbs if you're not playing him naked. There's so many fun spots this week at wide receiver. And then obviously it's the wide receiver position, guys. Like there's so many different things that could happen. But, when we're talking about on paper plays, there's going to be a lot of guys that stand out in that range. The Rams wide receivers, I think, will get talked about. And that's, with Puka and Cooper Kupp sitting, even though it is a backup. I think, Tutu Atwell, Winnington, who burned some people earlier this year when he was popular, and then McVay chose not to play him. Like, we'll see what happens in this regard. Ray McLeod, if there's no Mooney, fun slate to talk about. Jalen McMillan as well for Tampa Bay. So, Maddie, talk to us about wide receiver and how you're attacking your builds, and who would be some guys that you'd want to jam in because you're paying down at quarterback. You have the salary to do so.
Yeah, I think in terms of jamming in, it's Mike Evans at the top. You mentioned it, and there's really 2 offenses that I want as much exposure to this week that I can get, and that's Atlanta against Carolina and the Bucs against New Orleans. The main guys are Bucky Irving and Mike Evans for the Bucs, and it's Drake London and Bijan Robinson for the Falcons, especially if Mooney's out. London saw 13 targets last week, and this is a Carolina defense that is just going to essentially roll over and let the Falcons do whatever they want. So the entire offense could just roll through London and Bijan there. So I just want as many of those guys as I can of that grouping. So London and Mike Evans are 2 of my favorite receivers. Juwan Jennings, obviously, he caught his touchdown that he caught last week, I believe was called back or something. Because he caught one I'm pretty sure he caught one from Dobbs and they called it back, and then they ended up running it in or whatever. But all that to say, Jennings did seem to have a rapport with Dobbs, and whether that's going back to being his old quarterback, that has to help. But Jennings at 5,800, if you're playing Dobbs, I think you have to have interest there. I actually, Ryan, you might actually go a little nuts on this one, but I kind of like DJ Moore this week. We didn't really talk about the Bears, but I mean, Green Bay's not really playing for anything. I think they're gonna rest their guys. And this is Caleb Williams. Needs like I saw somebody joking on Twitter saying he needs like 607 yards to throw for like 4,000 this year. Like he's obviously not gonna throw for 600 yards, but I mean, if there was ever a time for the Bears to really break the slate, wouldn't it be week 18, to give the Bears fans false hope heading into next season, that Caleb Williams can go into Green Bay and win a game against their backups. But DJ Moore's 5,900. The guy sees double-digit targets, on a regular basis, 8 to 10 targets pretty much every week this year. It's 5,900. And like I said, Green Bay's without Jaire Alexander for the rest of the season. And I think they're just going to sit some of their guys anyways. Given their playoff scenario. So I kind of like the Bears receivers. It's a consolidated offense. So one of those, Moore, Allen, Rome, I'm cool with any of those. You guys mentioned the Colts. I like either Downs or Pittman. I'm good with either of those. Sutton, I'm good with him as a one-off, though. I really do think that if the Broncos get like a 2-touchdown lead, Sean Payton's going to do everything he can to just not turn the ball over and just sit on the clock. As much as he can, in my opinion. So I kind of am hesitant on loading up on Broncos guys if you don't think the Chiefs can push the pace even a little bit. So not as high on Sutton personally. And yeah, it gets pretty gross pretty quick. Those are pretty much the extent of the guys I like. And then, yeah, if Mooney's out, Ray McLeod is definitely in play. I would say. Though I will say, we'll talk about a tight end, but the last couple of weeks, Penix gets down there in the red zone and he's kind of trusted Kyle Pitts. I know Pitts turned one over, but Pitts was the guy that caught the 4th down touchdown.
Yeah.
So Penix has shown, he will go to Pitts in the red zone. So, with Mooney being out, could lend itself to more Pitts instead of Ray McLeod, but I do think Ray would still be in play, but yeah, it's again, this slate is just so straightforward for me, and I'm not going too much off the board. I really love Tampa Bay and I really love Atlanta.
Yeah, great spots. Obviously, Maddie, to be attacking, and I think we talk about it all the time, but you got to make some stands. Even on a Week 18 slate, with a lot of variance. So and we know I know you're more of a single lineup kind of player as well too. So it'll be fun to see what the how ownership shakes out and how plays shake out in the tournaments that you're in, Maddie. Kev, talk to the people, man. What are you doing at wide receiver, and how do you think they should be attacking their lineups?
Yeah, without really needing to get into the players that I completely agree with everybody that Maddie just brought up. A couple of the setups for the wide receivers. Cortland Sutton needs 82 receiving yards for $500K, and then you have Marquez Valdes-Scantling needing 1 touchdown for $250K. So those are two. And then DeAndre Hopkins needs 9 catches for $250K. He needs 1 touchdown for $500K. I think it's 140 receiving yards for another one that they have. I think it's more likely maybe they try to get him a touchdown. Maybe they try to get him. I doubt they're going to get him the 9 catches. So I don't think that's going to happen. I think best bet, maybe they get him on the first couple drives. Maybe they try to get him in, or maybe that's all he plays is in like red zone packages, and he goes down. They try to get him that 1 touchdown and move on. Because Andy Reid is somebody that will try to do whatever he can to get those incentives for them, but that's a little bit too much. Like 9 catches, 140 yards, like that's like him playing the whole game. I highly doubt they would allow him to play that play it like that, considering he's going to be a big part of what they want him to do in the playoffs. So I don't think that is as much in play. But I think Malik Neighbors went absolutely nuclear last week with the boy Drew Lock. Drew Lock won somebody out there a lot of money. The monster game that dude had last week. Just kept scoring touchdowns. I'm like, what is happening right now? Like, that is an all-time just
how we drew it up, boys. Just how we drew it up.
If you're the Colts, can you imagine being a Colts fan watching this and just sitting there watching your season go down the drain? at the hands of Drew Lock. Just absolutely couldn't miss last week. But Malik Neighbors, it's seeing like a ridiculous 30, 40% target share. The dude is out here running 100% of the routes every single week. Sees a really solid target share. So, I mean, he's in play at 7,100. You already brought up Ryan Thomas. The dude saw a 46% target share last week. Just has been absolutely ridiculous. He's been their entire offense, really the last month of the season. I don't know if this is going to hold, but his ownership feels really low, at least right now. Like, he feels like he should be a 30% owned guy. Like, just how involved he's been in the offense, how he's produced. Right now, that's not looking like that's going to be the case, so that'll be interesting. I think of the Colts wide receivers, I think it's Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce are the two guys that make the most sense, because if you look last week, I mean, so what's happening is two things. One, Josh Allen's only playing on 3 wide receiver sets. So that is a problem because he's not out there as much. Because you have Michael Pittman running 90% of the routes. You have Alec Pierce running 80% of the routes. And Josh Downs only ran 57% of the routes last week. He only saw a 10% target share, which was kind of frustrating. I'm not saying that can't bounce back his way. Some of that is, I will say, the Giants actually were really good against slot wide receivers. So I think that maybe had something to do with it with Josh Downs. I'm not completely saying to stay away from Josh Downs, but Michael Pittman is a clear, target earner with Joe Flacco on the field. 26% target share last week for him. Scored a touchdown. So 9 catches, 109 yards. But Alec Pierce is also, he's just kind of been that dude. Like that he's their deep threat. He has a 22, his average up the target is 22 yards. So I think Alec Pierce is also in play. He was kind of the guy that everybody looked over last week. It was kind of discussion between Josh Downs and Michael Pittman, and no one really talked about Alec Pierce. And, Alec Pierce put together another really solid week. That's kind of been what he's been this year. He's a little bit more boom or bust. But, he had 50% of the air yards for this team. So I think if I was going to make a stand, though, it probably would be Michael Pittman, who I think makes a little bit more sense. Courtland Sutton, we've already talked about. Adam Thielen is definitely in play again at $6,200. He had a really solid game last week. Was definitely an optimal wide receiver. Juwan Jennings, I think when Dobbs came on the field last week, he was targeted like 4 of the 5 passes that Dobbs threw. But Jennings is going to be popular. I think, obviously, Ricky Pearsall going off is going to make him really popular as well, especially with Deebo Samuel being ruled out. But what are your guys' thoughts on Tyrell Shaver? He's kind of the trendy.
Here we go.
The trendy 3K wide receiver that a lot of the touts are talking about this week is being in play. I don't really see the appeal of it. He did catch a touchdown for them last week in that blowout loss. But you are talking about Mitchell Trubisky's going to be out there throwing the ball, not Josh Allen. But it was, I think, Mitchell Trubisky that actually threw him the touchdown last week. But, it was like a 60-yard touchdown for Tyrell Shavers. But, I mean, I don't know. Like, he seems to be the guy that everybody's talking about this week, and I don't really see much of the appeal.
I'm good on that. I'd rather play the Chiefs guy, Nico.
I don't know if I could necessarily trust that. Depending on who else is out there for Buffalo as well too for a full game. Hey, shout out to Big Rob, who's coming in the chat. Rob, 7489.
I would assume that most of those guys like that, it's going to be similar like a Chiefs situation, right? Like I said, like if I had to take a stand on a Chiefs wide receiver, it'd be Romeo, just because I think he's going to play the entire game, and he's like
right. And Carson Wentz is going to sling it.
Yeah,
Carson Wentz is like Jameis Winston. He doesn't care if there's 8 defenders covering his guy. He's going to chuck it down the field.
Right. And then like tight end, it's I don't know how, because Noah Gray is so important to what they do. I think he's going to be another one of the players that maybe plays a drive or something like that, and they pull him off the field. Like, I think
it's going to be Hendershot running the main.
Yeah, Peyton Hendershot. So
he's a Cowboy.
I don't know. I just see a lot of buzz around Tyrell Shavers this week, and I'm like,
but it's like, again, this is what, like, let the people play those kinds of guys. I'm playing like Drake London and guys like that, and these guys are playing Shaver. Like, this week just seems straightforward to me, and I'm just not going to overthink it.
Yeah. It's tough when it's one catch for 69 yards and a touchdown. Like that just screams, kind of fluke play and the profiles of like, I mean, yeah, like Mims got there right last week. He even has like a little bit more of a profile, but like the MVSs of yesteryear and things like that. These guys who can go out there and like, yeah, just run a go route. And like, sure, that seems nice, but if they don't do anything else, like you could be looking at a donut. So it's tough.
Right.
And then to answer this big round, if Carr plays, do you like MVS more? Derek Carr's already been ruled out, so he's not playing.
Yeah, for sure. Just real quickly before we toss it to tight end, I know that Chris Olave has been eager to play. So even though Carr has been ruled out, Olave has been trying to get back from this concussion for some time. They have not yet activated him. It sounds like they aren't going to, but I know that he has been itching to play, and he's been practicing obviously as well too.
From my understanding with that situation, it's they're just letting him practice just to kind of be around the guys. Be around and be out there and stuff like that. That's it. They have no interest in whatsoever, which they shouldn't. There's no reason to activate Chris Olave, who's had 2 concussions already this year, and he's had like 5 concussions the last 3 or 4 seasons. Like, there's zero reason for him to play. But
yeah. That would not be the smart thing to do. But
I agree.
The Saints have done dumber stuff this year already, so we shall see. Tight end boys, let's talk about them. So we got Bowers and McBride at the top. And I mean Bowers is always going to be interesting. I feel like, especially with the way this Raiders team has been playing, especially becomes interesting if we're going to get a full go on the other side from the Chargers. So definitely we'll be monitoring that. Trey McBride, he finally gets his touchdown catch last week that Kyler Murray promised us 2 weeks ago that he would be getting, but gets that touchdown reception on the board. And if Kyler Murray's out there, definitely have to have some interest in McBride. Other than that, it gets ugly real quickly, boys. I mean, Kittle's likely not going to play. Kelsey's not going to play. Otten's not going to play. Goddard's on IR. Hunter Henry's questionable, which frees up, Austin Hooper from the grave. I mean, other than that, like you got to scroll down. And Chiga Konku, we talked about him last week. If he's questionable, but if he plays, he's 3,800. I've seen a lot about Zach Ertz and incentives this week, but I believe he already hit those from the Sunday night game because it was massive for him. I'm not sure if there are still incentives for him to reach, but he's 4K and definitely in play if I'm going to be playing Jaden Daniels. I mean, tight end is just so gross this week. You got Tyler Conklin, who's he ends up being in optimal lineups last week because of the garbage time that he's getting from the who is it? Tyrod Taylor comes in. It's a gross tight end week, but I definitely am interested in some Bowers, and that's kind of who I was thinking about, Maddie, when you were talking about getting Dobbs into lineups. It just frees up that much more salary to get up to a guy of his pedigree. I think the pit's called by you, Maddie, as well too at 4K. It's interesting without Mooney being out or with Mooney being in, and if Mooney's out, then that might be wheels up for a play there. But there's not a lot that is really standing out to me at tight end, so it's really gonna. I don't want to cop out, but it's really gonna just come down to how I'm building the rest of my lineup, and then who can I fit in of the guys that I like, because it's such a crapshoot. Maddie, what are you doing with tight end this week, and how are you attacking it?
Yeah, I think tight end is, again, it's another position for me that becomes extremely straightforward if there's a certain injury that's out. And that's Juwan Johnson's the big one for me. If he's out, I'm just playing Foster Moreau and moving on. Moreau's 3,200. Juwan Johnson had 10 targets last week with Rattler. And Rattler's already had a decent game against Tampa Bay earlier this year. He threw for 240 and a score. So, the Saints will be trying to play spoiler, obviously, against Tampa. And if you're playing, if I'm playing Bucky Irving and Mike Evans, the hope is New Orleans can keep pace somewhat. And Rattlers seem to like the tight end position. And like, Kevin, you just talked about, Olave is not expected to play. So if Johnson's out, lock button Foster Moreau, and I'm moving on. But because tight end, is absolutely abysmal on this main slate. Like, I have no interest in playing any of these priced up guys. And I have no clue which of these values is going to catch a touchdown, because like I mentioned, a few minutes ago, when you have all these backup quarterbacks, there's not going to be as many red zone opportunities. And so, it really is going to be a random tight end that scores once or twice that hits value.
Right.
But I like Moreau. He's 3,200, so he's not overly expensive. Kyle Pitts is another one. That's an offense that I expect to score a lot of points, and maybe it just falls into Pitts' hands twice. He's 4K, so he doesn't really break the bank either. The other injury that I'm monitoring this week is Chigo Okonkwo. I mean, he's seen 28 targets in the last 3 games, and that's a team that's been playing for nothing all season. So he's got a Q tag. I'd expect him to play, but yeah. So I'd say Moreau if Johnson's out. Otherwise, I like Chig and Pitts.
Yeah, no, good call on Foster Moreau, Maddie. We've been talking about him for a little bit the past couple of weeks. I will say there are, Payne Durham. Obviously, we can't forget about him. He's great in Baker stacks, especially with Cade Otton being out. And then Will Dissly. If the Chargers are playing for something, I think I'll have interest in good old Willie there as he comes back from the first game last week and took a while for him to get going, but he was on the field there with Stone Smart. To kind of be at play with Herbert there, and he just gives them another option to kind of open things up. He's had such a good he's had a really solid year being there with the Chargers, and we know that he'll be on the field. So if he can get peppered with some targets and take off from McConkey, I think that's an interesting play as well too. Kev, what are you looking at tight end, and how are you attacking this week?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much the same one. I mean, Bauer, McBride. I don't think you really need to get too crazy with it. Kyle Pitts, I don't mind that. I mean, looks like he has a little bit of rapport with Michael Penix. And then, I mean, if you want to play like a Peyton Hendershot, if you can fit him in $2,500, he's probably going to play all the routes. He's going to play all the snaps. They're going to have to throw the ball to somebody there in Kansas in that game. And so I think Peyton Hendershot, $2,500. If you want to look there. Is probably where I would look to go. Like, I don't think you need to get too crazy with tight end this week. A lot of players you would want to play are out. If Juwan Johnson does play, I think you probably look at him as well, as well as Foster Moreau if he were to be out.
Yeah. No, it'll be a pretty gross tight end slate yet again. I feel like we were doing so well with tight end slates early on in the season, and then it just all of a sudden kind of got ugly on us the longer it went on.
Yeah, Big Rob's right. I think the 2-game slate has better tight ends than the 13-game main slate. It's crazy.
100%. Like I would beg for Jordan Akins even to be on this slate the way he's been getting targets. Yeah. So yeah, no, tight end will be. I'll treat it like defense. Like I'll see where my teams are going, and then who fits in that I like, and we'll play it. But yeah, I think I will be trying my darndest to get up to a guy like Bowers, because if he goes out and gets 25, I just don't know if these other guys have the capability of doing so. So want to get the points at the position, but be a fun one to attack as we get to our builds for the Sunday main slate. Guys, this is the DJ Nation podcast powered by the Fantasy Authority. We got talking about this week 18 slate, and we got defenses to break down. We're going to build this team, and we're going to get on out of here. It's a fun one to attack, and we appreciate you guys rocking along with us, whether you're listening live here on a Friday night or if you are just chilling. If you're chilling and listen back to this as you're building your lineups, we appreciate that. Boys, we got defense to talk about here, and usually don't talk about paying up for defenses, but the way this Saints team has been looking, my goodness, they are absolutely atrocious. And so 3,600 Tampa Bay, I mean, if I can get to them, I definitely will. We saw it last week with team like the Bills, and the defense just goes out there and dominates. You want to have them, and we know that this Tampa Bay defense hasn't been, the defense that we've been accustomed to necessarily over the years, but this New Orleans offense is just a shell of itself with all the pieces that they're missing, and they're not really priced up all that high that makes it tough to get away from them. So definitely have interest in a $3,600 Buccaneers team. I think the Seahawks will be pretty popular at 2,900 going against the Rams, going against Carson Wentz. This Seahawks defense has been really, really solid this year. And then, I think I might be interested in the Cardinals just to get some leverage on Dobbs, but I really do like getting to the Buccaneers, getting some exposure there. Potentially could be talked into the Broncos, but don't know if I'll necessarily get to that. And then the Falcons defense, they've been really coming on strong as of late. They're 3,200. So, even with as good as the Carolina, as competitive, I should say, as Carolina has been, I still do have interest in the Falcons defense. Maddie, how are you attacking defense this week?
Yeah, even though we've got a lot of awful quarterbacks on the slate, it's like there's not really defenses that stand out. I mean, I would say if salary wasn't a thing, I would probably just pick the Broncos at home against Carson Wentz and backups. They're 3K, so they don't even break the bank either. They're just going to be popular. So like in a vacuum, they're my preferred play, but with ownership, it's obviously you have to factor that in. But outside of them, I mean, I guess the Giants ? I mean, 2,600 against Philly's backups, but they're on the road. So, the Philly quarterback, situation actually looked like it was able to score points against Dallas, who has actually played better defense, over the last few weeks this year. So, defense and tight end for me are just kind of really disgusting. And like you, Ryan, it's going to be what salary do I have left after I build my team, and what defense and tight end do I like the best of that available salary?
Yeah. 100% straightforward. Kev, how are you looking at it?
I think the Giants are in play with obviously with all the Eagles that are going to be out. They're $2,400. I think you could look there. The Packers are a pretty easy play. I mean, the Bears, just their offensive line is so bad. So it's just a pretty easy stack or a pretty easy defense to get to, even at $3,400. So
yeah, no, that's a great call there, and they've been good. I mean, they've been really good all season long, and there's nothing that that we can really bank on that Chicago would be able to do in Lambeau. That would be a pretty big upset there. So Packers definitely look solid to be able to get pressure at 3,400. I will say that I will have some, we talked about it 2 weeks in a row now. This might be the third, but Raiders are 2,300. Like if the Chargers aren't playing for anything, it does make it interesting to me. They're so cheap. I think Harbaugh will still be able to get these guys up, but the Raiders have, been quietly putting up like 6, 9, 12 points. Fantasy points. They just, they've been overshadowed by some other defenses really going haywire over the past couple of weeks. But 2,300, if I needed to get some salary savings and knew that the Chargers weren't playing their guys, I'd have interest in that for sure. Any final words, guys, for the people as we wrap up week 18 by building a lineup and making things go?
No, this slate's horrible, and I can't wait for the Sunday night game.
Yeah, the Sunday night game is absolutely insane. Obviously, we break down everything on DraftKings over here, but if you guys are playing on FanDuel, I don't see how you don't build in spots for that Lions and Vikings game. It should be absolutely bananas, and expect to be far right. What did you say, Maddie? 57 total. It might be bet up by now,
Yeah.
But I know the total.
That's what it opened at, was 57.
Yeah,
let me see what it's at now. I haven't looked since it's not on the main slate.
It's got to be bet up, but that's a fun one to get. That's a
56.5, so it came down half.
56.5. Okay, it came down. We just don't see totals like that all too often anymore. But the public is on Detroit. We know what the capabilities are for that game. It should be a fun one to watch. Hopefully everybody's going to be tuned into that. But before that, you guys got a lot of football. 13 game slate on Sunday to be able to get after it with. And before we sign off, as we normally do over here, we're going to build a lineup out for you. Week 18, we could all be on the same page. We could all be going elsewhere, but I did promise the people that I would start it off this week, and so I'm going to do that. I'm going to do it actually at the wide receiver position, boys, and I'm going to put in Brian Thomas Jr.
BTJ.
Who's up next? Who wants it? Kev? You go ahead.
Go ahead, Kev.
Bijan.
I'll go Flacco. Since we're playing BTJ.
All right,
Michael Pittman.
Okay, Kev, just skip over me. That's fine. But let's play Pierce and Pittman if you want.
Oh, yeah, good call.
Go ahead, Maddie.
Let's try to fit Bucky in. It's gonna get tight.
I'll do the cop out. I'll just put the Raiders D in as a placeholder, so we need the salary. That gives us 4,300 for tight end and flex.
Kev, you pick the flex. I'll pick the tight end. We could do Pearsall and Pitts probably, or we could do one of the really cheap guys at either position and then pay up for the other.
Would you have any pushback if we did the Giants and then I did Tyron Tracy and the flex, and then you could do, and I'll swap out $3,800 or the Michael Pittman of my own, and I'll play Pearsall. That'll leave $3,800 at tight end.
Or just leave it as it was. Keep Pittman in, and just use the 2.5, use the 2.7. Just pick one of these cheap tight ends.
Schoonmaker is 2,500.
Hendershot, you mean?
Oh, Hendershot. Yep.
Yeah, Hendershot. I'll just go with him. He's the highest projected.
All right. Yeah, and that leaves 200 on the table there.
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
So that team is Flacco, Bijan, Bucky, Irving, Brian Thomas Jr., Pierce, Alec Pierce, that is, Michael Pittman, Peyton Hendershot, Tyrone Tracy, Kev's boy, and then the Giants defense, 200 on the table, rounds it out. That is our Week 18 build, boys.
Disgusting team.
This is what Week 18 brings.
That's what Week 18 is.
Yep, that's what Week 18 brings you.
Gross.
It's a lot of fun, and these are the type of, you pick your plays and you build around it, and the type of fun that you can have on the Week 18 slate. Boys, it's been a fun regular season, chopping it up with you, chopping it up with the DJ Nation family, the three amigos back in the driver's seats for this 2024 season. So it's definitely been a fun one. But guys, that's not gonna be all. We're definitely gonna be coming at you guys for playoff time, and so we're not gonna do the full sign up just yet. But boys, regular season is in the books. Give the guys some last words. Give the guys some last words for regular season that they can bank on. The guys and the gals. Maddie, how you feeling about this year, and what are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to the playoffs. I do think there isn't this year. There's a couple of teams that are really good, but I think anybody can be beaten on any given day. We've seen the Lions have been vulnerable a couple games. Like Goff had the 5 interception game, and the Chiefs they've won, lost only one game this year, but they've won, I think, was it 9 games or something by one possession. So it hasn't been the typical, blowouts. So really, I think it's going to be a really fun playoff season. The regular season definitely was fun. It was a weird regular season, right? Because usually all the receivers stay healthy and all the running backs get hurt, and it was the exact opposite of that this year. We had all the running backs stayed healthy and all the wide receivers got hurt. So it's definitely a good year. But absolutely looking forward to the playoffs. DFS in the playoffs is a ton of fun as well. So looking forward to that. And then, it'll before it'll be April and we'll be getting ready for the draft.
as we always do. Yeah, a lot of fun. And Fantasy Authority, goodness all around. I know those guys do a lot of fun stuff on the Fantasy Authority side from the dynasty content, redraft perspective, to have you guys be set, 24/7, 365 for your fantasy lineup. So we just come in and we do a little light work here. I know Kev does a lot more heavy lifting on the other side of things, but it's always fun to talk DFS with you guys. Kev, how you feeling about the season? What you looking forward to?
Yeah, it's fun. It's a fun year. Obviously, a lot of injuries, a lot of issues that you guys already brought up, but it still was a fun year. The NFL DFS playoffs, I think, is some of my favorite time because you have a little bit more consolidated. but I love the NFL playoffs. At least the first 2 weeks, the wild card round and the divisional round are a lot of fun. It starts to taper off, especially once you get to like showdown for the Super Bowl. Then it just becomes kind of, just throw some stuff in there for fun. But yeah, so looking forward to that. I mean, NASCAR DFS, it's only next month. Daytona 500. I mean, you gotta get your fill in somehow. Okay. And if you've never played NASCAR DFS, it is, especially Daytona 500, is a lot of fun. I usually only play for like a month or two, and then I switch to baseball. But yeah.
Link in the description for the Discord if you guys are interested in getting Kev's takes on NASCAR, or you can just follow him on Twitter.
Listen, the great thing about Daytona 500 is you don't have to know a damn thing about. You just stack the back. That's all you do. Stack the back, baby. Like it's super easy when it comes to Daytona.
Hashtag stack the back, the Godfather's new nickname. Fantasy Rat 13 is where you can find Kev Steele on Twitter. Matty D at Matty DFS is where you can find him on Twitter and X, and myself, Ryan Williams, on Twitter and X at Ryan Alexander _W. Guys, according to Larry David, this is the last day that I could say Happy New Year to the people. So it's a new year. It's 2025. We turn the page. We get this Week 18 slate, and we get the playoff goodness. I mean, this is a great time. DJ Nation fam, to get that money. That's how we do over here. So it's a new year. You can clean the slate. If you didn't have a successful regular season, don't worry about it. You got a new year to attack. Actually, one more week of the regular season to attack, and then we get the playoffs as well too. So you got to turn the slate. It's all about the slate that we're in, and there should be some fun goodness happening in Week 18. Like we said, we will be with you guys for the playoffs. Make sure you're getting in on the action there. It's gonna be fun. But that'll do it for the regular season, and that will do it for the Week 18 main slate breakdown. We will catch you guys next week, but we hope to catch you guys on Twitter and in the Discord streets. But until then, get this money. Peace.